Hello and welcome to Hot Pursuit. I'm Yavuz Baydar. This is part of the series of Ahval on the current affairs. Today, my guest is from Paris, Professor Hamit Bozarslan with the School of Social Studies, EHES in short, from Paris. Welcome. Good to be with you, Hamit.
Hi.
Well, today we are going to speak about the mob boss Sedat Peker's series of videos that he released from a location, as he mentioned, from Gulf. And these videos has an explosive content, each and every one of them, because he's an attack against the establishment, against the government, certain figures inside the government, especially the Minister of Interior Süleyman Soylu, but also other figures that for a long time are linked with the so-called deep state of Turkey, the inner state structures or shadow state structures of Turkey, as we may want to call them. Mehmet Ağar is a former Minister of Interior. He had to resign after a scandal called Susurluk road accident, which ended up revealing the connections between the state and certain organized crime groups and also the politicians. And this was so-called the Devil's Triangle in that marked the 1990s in Turkey, especially the infiltration or penetration of illegal, unlawful, or subversive circles into the state cells or corridors. Now we seem to be seeing a similar movie, if you will. But these times are different, of course. It's 2021. Erdogan is president and there's a cabinet, but certain figures are for about 5-6 years, especially the attempted coup, are figuring almost everywhere in the financial and social and political life in Turkey. So what we have spoken about these things in our interviews. I want to hear your thoughts about what these videos seem to be telling us.
I think that Sedat Peker's videos show us that there is a continuity between Turkey of today and Turkey of 1990s. During the 1990s, you had the formation of some illegal structures, but which were directly linked to the state. These structures, they were sharing a rent coming from the drug connection in Turkey, around some 40 billion dollars by then, but they were also involved in the security apparatus. They were death squads involved in the killing of namely of the Kurdish intellectuals, but not exclusively Kurdish intellectuals. And these people have been basically the dominant actor of the coercive field in 1990s. And today we see that we have the same scenario, but with an organic continuity, because people who have been involved in the 1990s in the formation of these gangs, they are still active today. You mentioned Mehmet Ağar and his son, who by then was a young man. Tolga Ağar, they are still present. You mentioned Alaaddin Çakıcı. Alaaddin Çakıcı was already by then a dominant figure of these structures. And today, Alaaddin Çakıcı, after a couple of years of jail in France and in Turkey, is released. He is officially associated to the extreme right movement in Turkey, and he is not alone. His son is also there. So we have the impression that we have on one side the continuity, and on the other side we have a kind of renewal, generational renewal of this death squads and gangs formed in the 1990s. And that tells a lot about the regime, because it is very difficult now to mention the existence of, to posit the existence of a state, a legal and rational state in Turkey. We don't have anymore anything that we can call a state in Turkey. We used to say that there was a regime, but probably the concept of regime itself is not anymore relevant. Probably we should say a cartel. And in our previous discussions, I have already mentioned that in Turkey the Erdogan regime was a cartel which means the union of different components of the coercive field and of the economic field. Today, I think that this cartel is clearly there, but this cartel is also has also another meaning, and that's the Latin American meaning of the cartel. It means the drug cartel.
So it's some commentators mention the word narco state even in the light of these revelations or recordings by the mob boss Sedat Peker, narco state. And narco state follows also some other descriptions discussed about the current state situation of the state of Turkey as a rock state. So this is quite a bold statement that you are making, that there is no more anything called the state in Turkey. It's quite a bold statement.
It is a bold statement, but from a sociological point of view, a state is not an assembly of organs able to use coercion. A state is much more than. A state, including an authoritarian state, has to have check and balances in order at least to ensure its own production in time. We don't have anymore any kind of that kind of structures, and we have a kind of night of long nights as we had in 1990s in Turkey, but also the time of the night of long nights comes from Germany, the elimination of the SAs in 1934, and the impression is that Sedat Peker gives us today very clearly is that we don't have anymore a state with its own internal regulation, mechanisms of arbitration, mechanisms of decision making, but rather instead the gangs that are fighting at the summit of the state.
There's also a continuity, you said, between 1990s and today. There seems to be a pattern. The pattern is based on the basic state, traditional state structures commissioning some work to outside groups. These can be, diverse combination of collective groups being commissioned certain quote unquote dirty work, etc. in the 1990s. Then when the Susurluk accident happened, there was some sort of change in the approach of how the state should be formed or reformed, rather reformed. And many of those involved in the Susurluk accident circles or a picture were basically purged, left out, kicked out, sacked, and replaced by Gülenists, Gülen movement, mainly in key positions, especially in these security structures. And then again, as some commentators tell or say, that these were replaced again with these early shadow figures of the 1990s, especially after the attempted coup with the introduction of the state of emergency in Turkey. It seems that as things are, the current traditional state structures never can give up commissioning or relying on external, mainly illegal circles, including organized crime or mafia structures. Why is it so?
Why it is so? I think that one has to go back to the Hamidian period. The Hamidian period has started in 1876 and lasted until 1909. And the Hamidian state was a double state. You had an official state recognized by the international community, and everyone knew who was in the official state. But at the same time, we had also an internal state of Sultan Abdul Hamid, who was totally autonomous, which was totally autonomous and depending on him. And this internal state did not have only its coercive forces, but also its economic structures. When you take immediately after the Committee Union and Progress that has conducted Turkey to the Ottoman Empire into the war, Great War, and organized Armenian genocide, here you have clearly a paramilitary structure with three main bosses, and you call them Troika, but these Troika members they have also used massively the non-state actors, including the chetes, and chete means simply gangs, and part of the genocide has been organized or executed by the chetes. In 1990s and 1960s, once again, you have this kind of formation, the so-called struggle against the communist threat in the 1960s was partly done by the non-state actors from the extreme right movement. So I see that here we have something that continues, and in this perspective, in the sense that the nation is considered as being threatened and requiring to be saved, to be protected, and to be saved, someone has to take the action, and this someone cannot try to have, cannot seek any kind of juridical foundation, any kind of juridical legitimation, because the foundation, the liberation of the nation, the protection of the nation appears to be as the ultimate cause, the only sacred cause, and for this sacred cause, you are allowed to kill, and you have to be ready to be killed. When you have such a perspective, it became simply normal that the state or those who are at the head of the state and the non-state actors can decide that the moment is there, that the nation is threatened, and the juridical conditions are simply unbearable burdens that one gets rid of. You mentioned the attempted coup of 2016, but don't forget that immediately after, the discourse was constantly that the Turkish nation is threatened, that there is a struggle for life. This struggle for life is the most important struggle since almost 100 years, and everyone has to be involved, and that the state cannot accept any kind of juridical burden in order to fight this struggle. The destruction of the cities in Kurdistan, for instance, was a part of this struggle. The war in Syria, in the Syrian Kurdistan, the war in Libya, the war in Karabakh. Every time this idea that the nation is threatened, it has to be, the nation has to be saved, the nation has to be liberated or protected. And in this perspective, of course, you will not have respectable state actors, accountable state actors, because ultimately you are in an eschatological perspective, and eschatology does not fit with the law and the state of law.
If these videos do not only tell us about turf war between certain mob groups or certain organized crime circles, crime rings, then you said the state is basically no longer. If it is beyond a turf war, beyond sharing the cake, if you will, does it say in the absence of a state, as you suggest, where does it lead us? I mean, what is this struggle about basically now?
This struggle is about who will have the power. Having the power is not being necessarily a minister. Having the power is having the legitimation of power, being able to speak in the name of the nation, saying that me, the nation, explains that, means that you access to the resources of coercion, means that you organize the state or power, at least on the basis of the paramilitary structures, means that you have a parallel economy, and don't forget that we don't have only parallel military structures like the gendarmerie and special forces or police special forces or even civil special forces, but we have also a para-economic structures. So it means that basically you define the power, you take the power, you execute the power, you exercise the power, and you speak on the behalf of the power. And don't forget that even Sedat Peker, when he presents in a very theatrical way his messages, he speaks in the name of the nation. And he explains that. He explains what his vision of the nation is, why the nation is threatened. He explains that the Turkish nation has to be unified up to the China, the Chinese Xinjiang. So he basically does not speak on his behalf alone, but on the behalf of the nation. The histories that he tells, the history of his children, the history of his wife that has been brutalized by the police, that's the history of the nation. He speaks on the name of the nation. And Mehmet Ağar simply speaks on the name of the nation. I think that this idea that the institutions cannot be accepted, the institutions cannot be tolerated, because the nation itself is threatened, and that you are the nation, you are designated by the historical mission to save the nation, is of course an idea that cannot accept any kind of a juridical burden.
Professor Hamit Bozarslan from Paris, from School of Social Studies, EHES. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.